So you're new to Genshin, you're doing some 10 pulls while you don't get a 5-star. You do get 4-star Razor. Now, what do you get with Razor besides little Wolfie Boy? Well, Razor is a Claymore-wielding Electro user who is terrorized by Klee. And in this video, we're going to look at the basics of Razor, how his skill works, how his basic attack works, all of that fun stuff. So just like we do in every one of these videos, we're going to first look at the Razor we are using in this video. Now, this is not my Razor. This is Cloud, my mod's Razor. He used to main Razor at some point, and my Razor, while being C6, is level 20. So we're going to use his, not mine. This Razor is level 90 out of 90 with almost 18,000 HP, 1100 attack, 222 EM. I do like this little pep talk from the wolf thing behind him. Razor's crit split is going to be 53 over 188.4 with 184 energy recharge. For a weapon, a level 90 R5 Rain Slasher. For artifacts, 4-piece emblem, which is actually not a standard set that you'll see on Razors, and we're going to talk about that a little bit further into the video. For constellations, C3, and for talents, 10, 8, 11. You see that normal attack is crowned. Let's look at his passives real quick. The first one is going to decrease his skill cooldown by 18%. Using his burst resets the cooldown of his skill. The second one, Hunger. When Razor's energy is below 50%, it increases ER by 30%. Because he is a 4-star, let's look at some constellations. C1, picking up an elemental orb or particle increases his damage by 10%. C2, it increases the crit rate against opponents less than 30% HP. C3 is going to increase the level of his burst. C4, when casting Claw and Thunder, press version, opponents will have their defense decreased by 13%. C5 is going to increase the level of his skill. C6, every 10 seconds, his swords charges up, and the next normal attack will do an electro damage instance, right? Whenever he's not using Lightning Fang, a Lightning Strike to an opponent will grant Razor an electro sigil. We will talk about the sigils. Now, let's go look at how his entire kit works. Now, something that you did notice is that his normal attack was crowned. We are going to be using his normal attacks quite a lot. Razor is an on-field damage dealer. He cannot do anything off-field. So do keep that in mind whenever you are looking at using Razor. So Razor's normal attacks are going to be fairly normal. They are going to do physical damage. He's going to do a lot of physical damage, mainly because of that crowned normal attack talent. His charge attack is going to be the Beyblade version, where he's just going to sit there and lean back and spin and spin and spin. Now, we will be using his normal attacks a lot more, but first let's look at his skill. Now, his skill has a press and a hold. The press version is going to do an instance of electro damage. Now, you are going to notice there's going to be this little tiny orb floating up behind Razor. That is going to be an electro sigil. We can get up to 3 of these, and we can get them by using his skill, his tap version of the skill. If we hold down his skill, it is going to do the hold version. It is going to use up all of the sigils, doing AoE electro damage. Now, you can use his hold version at any point, but if you don't have the 3 sigils, you're not going to be getting the maximum damage from that hold. Now, something else to notice is that if we get a sigil, it is going to increase his ER by 20, up to 60 additional energy recharge because of being able to get 3 sigils at a time. So now we're going to look at his burst, and what his burst is going to do is his burst is going to summon this Electro Wolf thing kind of above Razor. When you do normal attacks, it is going to do a coordinated electro attack. So he is still going to be doing physical damage with his normal attacks. It's not an infusion. And then it's going to also deal electro damage as well as the physical. So he is doing 2 kinds of damage at the same time. If we use his burst and we have sigils, it will use up all of the sigils to give him extra energy. If you have constellations on Razor, make sure that you are just like hitting that tap skill constantly to keep the enemy's defense decreased, right? It's not necessarily going to do any more damage if you do it during his burst. It's not like Sino, where using his skill and his burst together work together. This is just to decrease the defense of the enemy from that constellation. Now, Razor's burst is also going to do a lot of things. It is going to increase his attack speed and electro resistance. It is going to make him immune to electro charge status. It's going to disable his charge attacks, and it's going to increase his resistance to interruption. There's a lot of things that this burst give to Razor. And of course, if you take him off the battlefield, it does end the burst. However, depending on how long or how much more time of the burst you have, it will give him back some energy. So if you accidentally swap him off, it's not like the end of the world, but make sure that you try and use him for the entire duration of his burst before you swap him off. So now we're going to look at a basic or beginner artifact set, and I'm going to say 4-piece Martial Artist. That is going to increase his normal and charged attack damage, and then upon using a skill is going to increase it even further. And as you saw, we are going to be using his charged attacks and his normal attacks quite a lot. Another option you would have would be like Instructor set. If you were to want to run him in a Hyper Bloom or a Quick Bloom team, then Instructor set is going to be very, very good for him, not just early on, but having an Instructor set is going to be good even late game. If not for Razor, just having an all-EM Instructor set is going to be very, very good for him. Cloud does have Emblem on here, so you might think like Exile, but he is running, this is a non-standard Razor, where he is using he is trying to get burst damage versus something else that would come with like you wanting to get EM for a Quick Bloom team. I don't think he ever actually ran Razor in a Quick Bloom team because Emblem's only going to affect the electro damage. It's not going to affect the physical damage. For the main stats on the artifacts, you have for your Sands, Cloud is running an ER Sands because of Emblem, but you also have EM or Attack. Depending on what team you have him in and depending on what weapon, is probably going to put what main stat Sands you want. But you do have those, I'm going to say 2 options. I'm not going to say ER is an option outside of Emblem. Of course, Electro Goblet and then crit rate or crit damage, whichever one you need more of. For weapons, R5 Rain Slasher is going to be very, very good, especially in a Quick Bloom or a Hyper Bloom team. This can be a very, very good option because your enemies are always going to be affected by Hydro and Electro, so then you'll just have access to this passive constantly. Now, some other options, like if you're wanting to run more physical damage than Electro damage, you do have Snow Tomb Star Silver. This is a weapon that you get inside of Dragon Spine, which is going to be a very, very good option because it does get up his physical damage bonus, which he, remember, still does physical damage during his burst. Then, of course, you have something like Serpent Spine. It's going to get up his crit rate. It's going to increase his damage as well. You could do something like Wolf's Gravestone, which is going to get up a ton of attack. In this case, I would then be running an EM Sands on him, especially in a Quicken, Aggravate, Quick Bloom, Hyper Bloom team. Now, we are going to talk about more teams whenever we get into the next video. However, the team that is actually running behind me is going to be a Hyper Fridge team, where it is going to be we're causing Hyper Bloom, but we also have Layla in there, one for a shield on Razor so that we don't have to like swap him out. But also to cause freeze on enemies, which you can still create blooms off of, which we have Nahida for. And then we have Shaneshow, which works great with Razor's normal attack burst. To then produce blooms, Razor's burst is actually going to be triggering those blooms, but the really cool thing that I like about this, the reason that I liked using this team, is because Layla's shield is going to apply cryo, Razor is going to cause superconduct on the enemies, and we can still, while all this is happening, create blooms and hyper bloom them. Superconduct is going to make the enemy weak to physical damage, which Razor is doing more of. So you can have a really interesting balance where you're kind of getting most of your EM on Razor from like Nahida's burst, with Nahida sharing. So you can get him a fair good amount of EM up. You can invest a good amount of attack, so that way your hyper blooms are doing good damage, and then your physical damage is also doing good damage, especially having this cryo character in here for superconduct with still blooming. That's why it's like hyper fridge, because we're hyper blooming and we've got cryo in there to have fridge for superconduct, so that way he can do more physical damage. This is also a team that you could kind of run with Fremine. You'd have to swap some characters out, but Fremine can also work in this team as well. And this was a really, really fun team. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it in the next video, as well as talk about a more designated Aggravate Hyper Bloom team with Razor. That is going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, do be sure to leave it down in the comments. Myself or somebody else will be sure to answer it. I'll see you in the next one.